thank you all for joining us this evening. You were brought into this program with your camera off and your microphone off. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. Megan McCullen will collect them and address them to Adrian after his presentation. We are recording this program, and the recording will be made available on the Detroit Public Library YouTube channel and through Wayne State University's website. I am Jennifer Dye, a librarian at the Detroit Public Library. We've had astronomy programs for several years now, and we have been online since 2020 for the usual reason. And we've been working with Megan McCullen of Wayne State University. She's director of the planetarium at the university. And she has been very helpful, including gathering questions. I'm sorry, I would like to ask her to speak a little bit about the planetarium and their programs.
Well, thanks, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. Hopefully my audio is okay. I'm not usually in this headset, so I feel a little strange. But we're delighted to be participating in this with the library. I appreciate Jennifer coordinating all of these for us. And if you are in the local area, I know we get a lot of people from further afield these days, but if you are in the local Metro Detroit area and you would like to come visit the Wayne State Planetarium sometime, we'd be glad to have you. We do free shows for the public on most Friday nights. And at this point, we're just doing first come, first serve. We haven't had to turn anybody away. So please come in. We've got shows at 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. most Friday nights. March is a little funny, so I'll post in the chat, but the first weekend is priority for Wayne State students and faculty with their IDs. But again, we haven't had to turn people away, so it shouldn't be a problem. But we will be closed for spring break on March 15th. So don't come then. I'll post the events calendar link. And otherwise, pretty much every Friday, we're in the old main building on campus. So you can find us pretty easily. And we also have a young astronomers show once a month. That's on a Saturday morning for the toddlers to 8-year-olds. That one will be on March 23rd. And again, will be on the events calendar link I will post. And then on March 21st, we'll be having one of our sciences and humanities under the dome lectures. That's different this semester or this month. We're going to have a sociologist speaking to us about his research. So you're all astronomy folks. Some of you may be interested. Others will not. It's called Lessons from Alleys and Cabbage Fields, from Detroit to Kaunas and back again. And that's a sociology professor from the University of Michigan, Dearborn, named Dr. Paul Draus, who does research on urban communities and got to do a Fulbright fellowship in Lithuania in the town of Kaunas, and is going to talk about what he experienced there and how it compares to what he sees here in Detroit. So that should be really fun. And then lastly, we have not posted the event yet, but we will be posting it this weekend. In April, we have statewide astronomy night, which will be April 11th. It might be the 12th or April 12th. I'm sorry. Pending weather. If not, we'll come out the next night, and we'll be out at the Belle Isle Nature Center with our telescopes focused on the moon. So if you've never had a chance to do that, we welcome everyone to come out and try your hand at using some telescopes with us. And there's lots of other events. We have an inflatable planetarium. There will be naturalists out talking about the animals that are around at the nighttime as well. So it's a lot of fun every year to go out to Belle Isle in April. So if you can't make it this year, look for it next year. And I know that's a lot, so I will stop now. But thank you, Jennifer, for giving me a chance to share that.
Sorry, when the phone rang, I had to turn this off. I had a question about the recording being posted, and so I just answered that question with the link, which I will actually now send to everyone. It will be a couple of weeks before it's up. But all of most of our other programs have, including our eclipse safety program from January. Solar eclipse safety, obviously. Now we Uh, well, I'm going to change the order of this a bit. I'm going to talk a bit about our programs for the actual eclipse. And then I will introduce our speaker, Adrian Bradley, who does a wonderful job telling us about ways to photograph astronomical features. Like most public libraries, we will have programs on April 8th to view the eclipse. For more information on the program that we have at the NAP branch, you can come to this link. That is not that you need to do that, but it's a bit more information about the timing of the eclipse. We'll have activities between 1:30 and 4:30, including making safe viewers, and we will have eclipse classes and a telescope with a solar shield. If the weather cooperates, and this is Michigan, we should be able to see the shadow of the moon cover over 90% of the sun. The path of totality runs south of Detroit, and both Adrian and Megan will be going south to see the totality. Adrian Bradley is actively involved in several astronomy clubs, and he seems to keep getting roped into officer roles. He frequently travels with camera in hand to photograph the night sky, and he's been helping with the Belle Isle programs that Megan and the planetarium put together. Tonight, he will be sharing techniques for getting clear photographs of the solar eclipse that we're expecting on April 8th. Although I'm sure that he will tell you to enjoy the experience rather than spending too much time and effort to get a photograph. Adrian?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. And yeah, I get roped into officer jobs, but I've avoided most of them so I can go out and actually enjoy the night sky. So you heard Jennifer. First thing she said was enjoy the eclipse and not worry so much about your camera settings unless you've done photography of the sun itself or the moon itself. Your best bet is if this is your first total solar eclipse, your best bet is to enjoy it. And I saw in the chats, because it popped up, Rochester, New York is in the path of totality. Cleveland, Ohio is planning a big event. They're in the path of totality. Those of you who are near Canada, there's a place, one of the places that I'm considering going is Point Pelee National Park in Leamington, Ontario. They are in the path of totality. And one of the reasons it's interesting, you look at Great Lake sites, is because those lakes are big enough to affect weather. It is going to be April 8th, and I'm going to start sharing my screen as I go here. Let's see, share. I'll share whole desktop because that's how I usually do it. And let's put this up. So you all should be able to see a website that I actually found just by doing a search on total solar eclipse 2024, science at nasa.gov. A great place to go. There are going to be a number of sites if you do a Google search. And here you can actually see the simulation going on. Someone imaged what it looks like when the sun goes total, or when the eclipse goes total. So things like where and when, you can see this little picture here. That's the path of totality, and that path runs through a number of southern states. It comes up towards us, takes a turn right before the border of Michigan, and heads out towards Rochester, New York. So if you want to see this, which is what's being shown on this page, totality, and I'll talk a little bit about what you're seeing here in a minute, and why photographing it is, it may be a little easier than you think. I'll explain that. I have to remember my thought, but path goes through to Rochester, New York, you'll want to see this as opposed to these partial phases. It's like you're getting most of it. That's about where Detroit stops. But then path of totality, you get to see this. The sky changes during an eclipse. It goes dark. It feels like dusk everywhere. All sorts of things happen where you hear nighttime activity starting. But then the moment it comes out of eclipse, it's like daybreak again, and you hear plants opening up. There's a pollen rush. Someone asked me if they were just crazy or did they feel a pollen rush after the eclipse ended. And the answer is yes. Nature responds to things. Animals shut down, birds stop flying, and then animals get active again once the any sliver of the sun comes out. As Jennifer said, you want to view the eclipse, and we'll continue to use this. We'll use what's on the screen here to talk about when you can look at it naked eye and when you should not. So right now, your eclipse glasses are on. Then you get to this point, your eclipse glasses are still on, and now you take them off. This is as bright as the full moon. So those of you that have done full moon shoots, those similar settings will give you pictures. You see that diamond ring phase there, get your glasses back on, turn away from the sun. Any part of the sun, even that small sliver, is enough to cause blindness. The holes in your corneas will become, shaped like any part of this crescent. So viewing the total solar eclipse, someone will call out a time for totality, and then you can look at it naked eye, just like you're looking at it on my screen. You won't need eclipse glasses. The moon, that's one of the amazing facts about the size of the moon and its distance from us, and the size of the sun and its distance from us. It happens to make them appear the exact same size in the sky, and the moon blocks the harmful light that's coming from the face of the sun. And what you see, and we'll describe it when it happens, it'll happen again. What you'll see is this part called the corona. So it goes total, and you see that area around the sun. That's the sun's corona. And it's something you only see in two cases. One, total solar eclipse, or two, something man-made blocks the sun and causes the corona to be visible. But it's you have to not only block the sun, you have to block all of that light that's coming in. So right now the moon is positioned perfectly so that any part of its orbit, it can happen where it'll block all of those, it'll block the disk of the sun and the disk of the moon are the same. In annular eclipse, I'll briefly mention an annular eclipse happens when the sun and the moon are not quite at that same distance. The moon is a little further, it's a little closer to the sun than during total. So you see a ring of fire around the moon. That's the annular eclipse that we just had last year. This one is the total solar eclipse that we are going to look at. So here are some pictures I took. I went to the total solar eclipse of 2017 in Tennessee, and I brought along with me a couple of telescopes. You do not need telescopes to take photos of the eclipse. If you do bring telescopes, you can take pictures from the eyepiece and still get pictures of totality. However, they may not be as good as if you use your camera and you're seeing images that were given to me, really good images of the total solar eclipse as it was forming, and you saw it on the NASA page, how it looks when the total solar eclipse is happening. So what I'll show you here, this was an eclipse watch party I went to in White House, Tennessee. It's outside of Nashville, about an hour. And we were fortunate enough to be able to see this eclipse, whereas in Nashville, a cloud came and covered the eclipse. Now, if you go somewhere where a cloud covers the eclipse, you are still going to see the sudden darkness. and that's when you know it's happening. The goal is to see everything, but I'm breezing through these pictures because you saw the people that came out, you see the map and all the people sitting here, but we're going to skip ahead. Now, I'm taking these pictures using my iPhone. First contact looks just like this when the eclipse starts. You'll see that if you stay in an area where you're close to the eclipse but not on the center line, you're going to see some of these phases. And so you'll still see something. You may see up to about this, where you've got the moon mostly covered. I think you get a little further along. You get maybe to about here, and then the moon's going to move off of the sun. Doesn't quite go total because in the Detroit area, it's just not quite close enough. And the reason it works that way, the moon's shadow is only so big and covers a certain swath of the earth, and you only see the entire sun covered if you're within that shadow. So the goal is to get to that shadow. Those of you, I saw someone from the UK, those of you who are overseas would have an opportunity in the following years where the total solar eclipse is going to hit something closer to your country, and it's worth going down to see it if you can. A lot of folks will fly from eclipse to enjoy it, even if it's in Antarctica, which that's the last eclipse that I recall. I think there was totality last year or the year before. It was in Antarctica, and the editor of Astronomy magazine and a friend of mine, David Eicher, went down to see that one. Look for some talks online. I'm gonna give you two names to write down. Alan Dyer, who is from Canada and has done a lot of work on eclipse, how to view. Look up his work. He's very good. Look up Fred Espinek. Let me see if I can type that in chat. I'd probably have to stop sharing. I'll type those names after I'm done, with this presentation here. But those two gentlemen have very good information, even more information on chasing eclipses, taking pictures of eclipses. My information actually boils down to this. If you can take a picture of the full moon, you can take a picture of a total solar eclipse. You can handhold it. If you're a wildlife photographer, you can handhold it. Think about the moon and the sun together like this. Think about it as a target, a very slow moving target. So you'll want to adjust for stability. If you use a tripod, it's even easier. You could try aperture priority on a tripod. You could, if you use manual settings, set it for the shutter speed at which you can hold it, or a shutter speed at which you're comfortable with. Set your aperture all the way to f11 or more if you want. I've taken successful moon and sun pictures. I turn the aperture as close as I can, f22. I've shot the sun directly, but it had to be low in the sky, a little bit higher, sunrises and sunsets. If you think about a sunset, you still shoot that at f22. Not so much for a total solar eclipse. You can shoot that, you can bring it on down to f11, even f6, which is usually minimal for some of the base, like wildlife lenses. If you want an image like this, which another friend of mine sharing images took, this is a good image of what you're seeing. This approximates what you're seeing without doing special tricks like stacking photos or astrophotography style things. If you're an astrophotographer and listening, consider during totality doing a stack of photos. Use lower gain or unity gain and do a number of photos and use your post-processing to get details of the corona, and I'll show you how that looks. For most of us, I'll be happy with a picture that looks like this. Astrophotographers, you'll be happy with a picture that looks like this. These streamers are real. If you look through a telescope, you'll see the streamers. Remember the lines that we all drew in the sun, where we drew the sun and we drew the rays to indicate the rays of light. The corona shapes itself like that. That's a real thing. Here's a prominence that's in here as well. I might be able to zoom in just a little bit, or maybe not. Yeah, this one won't let me zoom, but prominences where basically or coronal mass ejections is what they're called. I call it the sun burping. That's the way I like to think of it. And in this material flies off of the sun. When we have aurora, it comes from material flying off of the sun during mass ejections like this. And you get to see that naked eye if you use a telescope to magnify. I'm not so sure if binoculars will give you that look, but depending on how good your eyesight is. Now, this egg-shaped thing was the picture that I took. This is before I really got into photography, and over the last number of years, I've of course gotten a little bit better, but this was the view through my telescope using an iPhone, and you still got the sense of what it was like. The moon is completely in shadow and covering the sun, and this corona was so bright that it overexposed. And so rather than this nice picture here, or even nicer pictures like the one I showed you over here, this picture is a really good one. So instead of this, I ended up blowing out that corona, so I got what looked more like an egg shape. So use your full moon settings. Again, the rule for full moons have always been f11 and 1 over ISO. So if you shoot at a low ISO, make that shutter speed and ISO match. Start there and adjust aperture priority. A tripod is the easiest way to do it because you don't have to worry about blurriness or is my shutter speed right. You can do things like aperture priority, or you can set the ISO to auto and start there. You can even take it in auto and see if the camera gets it right. One of the problems with doing that is there's differences in contrast. If you ever tried to take the full moon, there's differences in contrast that the camera may not be able to adjust, but our eyes know how to do it. You're going to see the eclipse and it's going to look just fine in your eyes, and the camera is going to have a tough time managing it. So if you treat it like it's the full moon, you should get better photos. That is the approach I am going to use, because I'm definitely not going to use this approach. But coming from someone who has seen a total eclipse, I reiterate, your first time seeing it, your camera gear is secondary to you experiencing not only the total solar eclipse, but experiencing what the sky looks like. This picture sent to me was a wonderful representation. It's dusk everywhere. You normally see this on the opposite side when the sun is setting, or near the sun, a little bit away from the sun where it's setting and going all around. This belt of Venus, as it's called, it goes around the entire horizon, and you sort of see the dusk kind of look that you've got here while this is going on. This was one of the better pictures that I had found that someone shared with me of what it looks like while you're in totality. Look at how dark this is. You're in deep dusk, or for those who know the twilights, it's like the border between nautical twilight and astronomical twilight. You're that close to how dark it is. And it's an amazing thing because it's not something we naturally see. Since seeing a total solar eclipse, I'll look outside, and if it's at a certain level of dusk, I'll think to myself, this is about how dark it gets during a total solar eclipse. And it's only It's usually within 5 or 10 minutes of astronomical twilight, and that's when you see stars. Well, you see stars come out during a total solar eclipse. If it's clear, you'll see stars around. And one of the images I hope to take, look up Alan Dyer. He's taken this image during a total solar eclipse. Starlight comes out, and if you get a picture of the night sky, you can get a picture of the night sky, but for that, you may blow out the actual eclipse while you're exposing, for a longer period of time to get the actual night sky. Now, one way you can manage that is to shoot at a lower ISO, do a longer exposure, and you can try shooting whatever aperture you use. You can start at the widest aperture you've got and narrow it down based on how much light you pull in. And if you're lucky enough, you'll have a total solar eclipse, you may have something like this, and you may have a bunch of stars around it. So that's a goal. It's not the end game for me. The end game is to see it. It's to see it with your own eyes and to have that visual imprinted on your mind. The pictures that you take end up becoming memories. And so here I'll share a couple of these images while it's this was before the eclipse, because you see it's still sunny out. And with the filter on my telescopes, people were safe to look at the eclipse. And you see a lot of people taking pictures. There's another filter. You bring a telescope, you bring a camera. There are solar filters you can buy to fit your camera, and I recommend looking those up now. They are probably selling fast since we're coming into March and this eclipse happens in April. You can order those online. You can type in solar filter, eclipse or eclipse covers for cameras, or solar filters. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to take pictures during the partial phases of the eclipse. You absolutely don't need one for the total part. And if all you want to catch is totality, then you don't have to worry about buying them. But those filters work for just solar picture taking in general. Not just eclipse pictures, but if you're looking to get pictures of the sun, and you don't want to wait for a whole bunch of smoke to come around, then that's what you can those are the type of filters you can get. You can do solar photography as much as you want, and then for that you just you set your aperture wide open. You can play around with it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, for those of you who are using mirrorless cameras or any large camera or even your phone, if you're trying to take the picture, taking the picture directly at the sun at any part of this partial phase, you can do it. I just don't recommend holding your camera up there for very long unless you have a filter. When I do this sort of thing handheld, where I take pictures, I tend to wait until it's lower to the ground. And when I aim my camera at it, I've got my aperture turned all the way as narrow as I can make it. So f/22, f/29, whatever the lens can handle, or however the lens is made, and the ISO with gain all the way down to base, and don't spend a whole lot of time trying to take pictures of the sun when any part of it is out. You can still do it, but you really have to be careful. This phase, for those that have not seen total solar eclipses, this is the diamond ring phase that happens before totality starts and right as totality is about to end. So there's two. It's a nice picture to catch if you can catch it. As you can see here, looking through a telescope, totality was caught. Is it the best image? No, but you'll want to catch your images anyway, because you want a memento of what you saw. And also consider taking pictures of the ground as it's partial, because the crescents will show up as shadows. Remember, I said if you look at the sun during this time, little crescents could be burned into your eyes, into your corneas, and it's the same with the shadows end up taking a crescent shape. So if you've never experienced an eclipse, while it is partial, take note of the shadows that are created and all the crescents that are created. It's one of the neat little phenomenons of doing astronomy. This is a colander, I believe, that normally would, I can zoom in on this one. Normally those would be circles, but during an eclipse, the shadows created are all crescents. And so it is it's a very unique thing. You see, there's no crescents in my shadow. So it's when there's a pinhole of light that's created, crescents, any pinhole of light, crescents will be shining through the light, and not, the round circular light that the shadow doesn't behave as you might expect with just a regular sun. It's a very unique thing that happens, because the sun and moon are far enough away to create this look, and the light is shining around the moon, and the light ends up coming in this crescent shape. So that's something to look forward to. In any eclipse, there are sunspots that may be on, and because our sun is active, your picture might get sunspots. This is the type of picture you get with either telescope or that filter that I was talking about earlier. You want a filter on your lens, a regular camera, or a solar filter for your telescope while this is going on. Some of you may know about the H alpha telescopes that show prominences and a different form of light. You can use those, but during totality, because that light is being scattered, you don't really see anything. During totality, you see other things that are visible to your eye, but are not in that spectrum, except for the prominences that are coming. So all you would see is a dark circle and a prominence or two, but you can see prominences through those solar scopes just looking at the sun. That's one of the safe ways you can look at a full sun in the sky. So this is, once again, pictures as we're getting ready to see totality. And I don't know if I set up my share to allow. I'm gonna stop and reshare. I'll play a little bit of this clip for you, for those that haven't been to totality. One of the things about the experience is very primal, and there's a lot of shouting, there's a lot of, everyone just sort of saying whatever comes to mind, because looking at it in a picture like this, it's a picture, and it's you see these sort of pictures all over when you're looking for solar eclipse information. Here's a rather good stacked image right here, showing the streamers and showing those rays that are coming from the corona. This is what you might see, and this is even, I believe, a star that this photographer captured. Regulus was near the eclipse in 2017. You may not see this exact same image when you see the eclipse in this upcoming year, April 8th. You might see more streamers or less streamers. 3 or 4 tend to be on it. One eclipse I counted 6, and I was looking at it through a live stream. And that's the other way you can see it, is through a live stream, such as in NASA will have a live stream. There will be planes flying along the shadow of totality where people will be able to, and I don't know how much it cost, but they sold out. It was expensive, where you'll be able to just see totality for a lot longer than the up to 4 minutes in some places that it'll happen. And so you've got this image, you've got your eyes, you've got the diamond ring image, which, you know, is it's, you know, a beautiful way to see. If you capture that, it's the moments before, right before and right as totality is about to end is when you can get that phase. But I'm going to stop sharing and reshare and make sure I have audio turned on when I share my screen, because I want to share sound and optimize for video clip. So I'm going to reshare. Let me see if I can. Oh. Okay. All right. Let's see if this works. I'm gonna. All right. Hopefully you can hear.
Oh!
Sorry.
Oh, wow. I gotta let you guys see this.
Still not getting good pictures through the.
Go look on his phone.
No, go ahead. You were here first.
So as we were
Just take a
watching,
look
people
at
looked at the eclipse on my phone instead of
That's the
the sky. You don't have to do that. Look directly at the eclipse.
But just take a look at that.
Through the telescope, it looks amazing. Bring binoculars. Recommend bringing binoculars.
Okay.
I'm just
Mars.
not steady enough.
Jupiter.
You're hearing me call out a couple different planets that are visible now.
Hey, that one's either Mercury or Mars. I'm not sure which. Yeah, it's either Mercury or Mars. I'm not sure which.
Over there.
Oh, is that a decent one?
Oh, Jupiter. That looks like the ring.
You hear the excitement in the kids. And notice
All right,
as
Aaron
it's moving,
and
notice how
Richard. Get
the
a
glowing
photo
going
in this
on.
one right now.
Okay.
You can see prominences off of the sun.
and it's about
If you
to
look at
end.
it.
I think the video cut
You
out.
can see the.
Yeah, the video cuts out before. I have a longer version that shows, and I'll see if I can find it somewhere. Yeah, I may not have included it. The video cuts out, and or as this starts to happen and you see the light growing out from behind the sun where the total eclipse is about to end. And so I told everybody, get away from the telescopes, and pulled. I think there was a little girl that was trying to view the eclipse, and I pulled her away from that telescope because your eyes are dark adapting, and all of a sudden there's bright enough light to light up the entire region, and you don't want to go blind from having that happen. So so when that light starts to cut in, you start to see a bright light on the edge of the moon as it's moving off of the sun. You want to turn away, put on your eclipse glasses, and hope that somebody else is capturing it. If you are taking photos of it, you want to you put your eclipse glasses up as you're taking pictures during totality. You're almost better off remotely taking your pictures so that you can drop your glasses back in front of your eyes as totality is ending, and you can hit your remote button to take the picture. Then you go over and you go cover your camera once totality ends and it's bright again outside. So those little tips will help. Now, if it's cloudy, I've got a couple more images I'll share here that were sent to me. Diamond ring. This is, at this point, you should not be looking at the eclipse. I'll reiterate, you can look at the eclipse when it's like this. You can look at it as much as you want and enjoy. You'll see these things barely move. They do stream, they go in and out, but I thought it would be really fast, and it turns out it just sort of sits there. And you observe it and you enjoy it. Here's a picture from that video where all of a sudden the light was coming in bright, and it was, these artifacts in the iPhone usually show up, those green artifacts, when you're trying to shoot right at the sun. The sun was breaking through and the light was getting more intense. So that's when you don't want, and I flipped it around because this was right side up. I had a telescope, a reflector that shows the image backwards. And that's when you do not want to be watching. Put on your eclipse glasses. This is a good picture of all of the phases. That's the phase that you're likely going to see in Detroit if you stay in the area. This is a star again. So his picture actually encompasses, and he's done some processing to get rid of, this is easily a stack photo of a few different images stacked together, and then some processing to darken some areas, bring some areas out. And he wanted the diamond ring phase, so this part of the sun is peeping through, but the rest of it are, various parts. Here's the full sun. This is first contact, and it goes through all the partial phases. Then it drops down, looks like this. Completely different. Notice with the corona and the moon, it transforms from this type of view where, I can see the sun, it's nice, and he's using a filter to take the picture. He's pulled the filter off, and then he goes back around. Once it begins leaving the sun, he's got his filter back on. And so the rest of the eclipse, people will jump in their cars and leave sometime before this happens, because the amount of time it takes to get to the eclipse, the same amount of time it'll take for the full eclipse to be done, and you have the entire sun in the sky. So this is a really good representation. You can see images like that. Will I take a picture like that? Probably not. My picture, if I'm lucky enough, will look something like that. If I decide I have time, I can go for something that looks as smooth as this. But they call these Bailey's beads. It's the moment right before the corona comes out and the moon has covered the sun. And these are mountain ranges on the moon that the sun is shining through with, we'll say, 99.5 to 99.6 of the sun covered. When it gets to 100, as it gets to 100, it's when the corona comes out. And here's another larger shot of it. There you see the coronal mass ejections. We call them prominences. They actually stay in that state for quite some time. We're used to anything related to like fire or flame or something like that going, kind of flickering and then coming out. These are massive. The Earth very likely fits underneath the little arc that I'm pointing at here. The entire Earth fits here. And that's how massive the sun is. More than one Earth may well fit underneath. This looks like a little thing, but if you were if you could somehow manage to withstand the sun's heat and you decided to venture close enough to see how large it is, it'd be larger than the entire planet. I don't know, based on where that is, if that one prominence is actually larger than Jupiter, but I'm sure it comes close. It's scales of size in the universe and even our solar system. Because we're so far away, it looks tiny, but truth is it's massive. And then you see Bailey's beads here too, more mountain ranges that the light is shining through, and the corona is just starting to show. So this is a picture that a lot of folks look to get if you're doing timing where you're taking a photo every so often, maybe every few seconds, you're taking an exposure and then you wait 15-20 seconds, do it again. You end up with a ton of pictures. But if you don't want to try and capture the very moment and press the button, that's one of the best ways to do it. Get yourself an intervalometer or set your camera to just automatically continue taking photos. Whatever you can find. For your Canon shooters, you've got EOS Backyard that you can put on a small computer and hook to your camera. I'm not sure if there's other solutions like that for the Nikon or Sony or any other brands, Fujifilm, for instance, but they're there. And with your iPhone, you can still look for one of the iPhone. This is an iPhone picture. Of course, see this how blown out this is, but you've got kind of the gist. You still have the moon sort of sitting in the middle of this. Now, I've heard that the Samsung phones are pretty good. This is a smartphone picture. Maybe this was from the Samsung. But either way, you will get something if you take a picture at all, and as long as it's exposed well enough to see what you're looking at. See, for instance, this is the sun before the eclipse. We were looking at the sky, and I still took a picture. Just have to be careful what settings you use for that. And just try and live to see another eclipse. Remember, this picture that I took of these veterans here was a reminder that not everybody knows or thinks about things like total solar eclipse. They lived in Nashville, and as it turns out, they noticed everything was getting dark, but they didn't know that the eclipse was going on. They didn't really care too much. Their group of friends, they just kind of noticed the street lights were coming on, wondered what was going on, and just kind of gave it oh, okay, that's what was happening. But I enjoyed talking to them because what they remind me of is, one, the importance of outreach, to reach folks who may not otherwise know what's happening. If you get any of them to be interested in something in space, you've really done a good job of letting them know, well, this is it's a pretty big event and I want to go see it. You ought to, take a look. They're sitting right in the path of totality and not, and maybe not as concerned. And then you aren't surprised. There are some who are not going to be as excited about it, but those of you who came here tonight came because you wanted some info on taking photos of the eclipse. If you've never seen a total solar eclipse, you can see the pictures, but no matter how many pictures I take, even my woeful attempts, at the time, it was still an amazing thing. And you definitely want to see any part of totality if you can make the trip. If you can't make the trip, it's still amazing to see any part of an eclipse. I couldn't make the trip. These are some of the pictures that I've taken. Now you're going to see some Milky Way photos, but I want to highlight this. This is a full-on sun shot. This is probably not the corona, but there is brightness emanating from it. So you can take pictures of the sun directly, but you have to be very, very careful. This is as fast. This was a A6000. This was the lens I used. That was f14 was as narrow as it could get. 1/4000 was as fast as it could shoot. And for some reason, the ISO's not at 100, but 200. So this is over Lake Erie. There's this wall of clouds and fog, and I zoomed in. I took this photo. You can take the sun directly, and your camera can survive. However, just when you take the photo, this was a pretty bright sun. So after this, I was done. I took a couple photos, and I was done with that. Taking pictures of sunset. If this pops in, see if it'll zoom. So this is another safe time to take a picture of the sun because it's setting, and along the horizon, it is not as bright as it can get. So full moon pictures, I started out with these settings, f4, 5 seconds, ISO 100, and it blew the moon out. And it's a nice picture, moon blew out. But later on in life, I would learn to take some more full moon pictures, and here come a couple. So these are all starting points, f8, 1/400, 600 millimeter. I have a 150 to 600 millimeter lens. ISO 1600, the moon is rising. And it went behind a bank of clouds, but I managed to land autofocus right on the moon itself and take the photo. And I ended up with that. So these are some starting points you can try for the eclipse, but if it's too bright, you want to back down, or you want to back this down by raising the number. I guess I could say raise the number here to as high as you can, f32. F22 is more likely in most lenses as like the highest aperture you could use on your camera. If this goes up to 1/8000, give that a try. And this goes down to ISO 100. And if it's too dark after that, you can play with these until you get something that works. If you use a tripod, then you're not limited in terms of, I have to have a setting at least 1/640 because I'm shooting a 600 millimeter tripod. I think I got lucky with 1/400. I mean, that's something you could continue to try. Image stabilization in your cameras is what you would use if you're trying to take photos like this, get craters and detail. Now you're seeing all the detail down here in this photo, even though there's clouds covering it. So you're going to get some detail in your total solar eclipse pictures, whatever is available. So, it'll be a little brighter. It will be similarly dark, but a little bit brighter. The sun moon combination, the eclipse will be a little bit brighter than this. Here's another example. Kind of shooting at the sun in general. Clouds are your friend. If it's cloudy and the eclipse is still there, you're going to have to adjust for that because the eclipse is not going to be as bright, but it'll still be there. And so you may have to adjust just how much of any of the settings or how less of the settings you end up using. So I've said it a couple times, bring a tripod. Here you see me shooting at the moon at night. It's not completely full, but it was possible. This is an f11 moon, and it was possible to get some detail. I've got a couple other moon shots I'll share, go kind of through full moon shots. This one being a lunar eclipse, which is the opposite, 97% full. the moon turns red from the shadows, the red light running along from the sun around the earth to the moon. The moon sits in Earth's shadow, and all of the red light basically from sunsets all over the earth illuminates the face of the moon. But over here you see where there's no shadow. The time it took to expose this was too much to expose this little piece of the moon. So that's a whole different type of imaging altogether. As you can see, you can do stars. Not so much with solar eclipse photography. It isn't quite as dark as it is with lunar eclipse photography. It gets to the point where it's a lot darker. So let me see how I'm doing on time. So it's similar. So what are my settings? F6.3. I used I used a tripod. I think this was aperture priority with auto ISO, and that's the image it came up with. And I would liken this image to about the same setting that would work on a total solar eclipse. You've got a bright part, you've got a dark part. Now, would you see all the detail of the moon in a total solar eclipse? Some folks have exposed long enough to get some of the moon detail, and then they combine it with when they take the picture of the eclipse itself and they have the sun and the corona, and they pop the moon right in. They pop the visible moon picture right in on top of the eclipse to create the sort of super image of the moon as it faces us being on top of the sun. If you're if you've got the if you're looking at totality and you take two images, one image to expose, which would be a long exposure, and you're going to have the sun part blown out, then you take your quick picture from the same location with the eclipse visible, and you marry the two together, you end up with an eclipse where you've got the moon's mare, the seas visible, but you you have that, and then you have the sun behind it. There are some images on the internet that look like that. It's a real image, but not one that you really would be able to see naked eye. You don't see that sort of detail because of the shadow, but I've seen that done before. And it's possible that some just took a regular full moon image and just sized it and splashed it over top of the sun. I'd rather try and do both at the same time, because then the moon and the sun were in the same place, and you get a kind of a real-time photo. So if you can take a picture of the moon, such as I have here, you can take a picture of total solar eclipse. Here are the settings for this picture. Again, I would recommend maybe these settings are going to be closer, because you notice there's starlight around, but it's not. It's a little bit of starlight, but not so much. You don't see it quite as much sunlight, or no, starlight during an eclipse, but you will see some. So I'd recommend that as a good starting point. And I think I have one more. Just like it's hard to get an image like this where you've got the moon and you've got the lake, I had to do that in two parts. If there's time, you may have to do your image in two parts. Shooting right at the sun, there's a sunset right there. It's safe to shoot at the sun when you know when to do it and you know when not to do it. So with that, and here's another total lunar eclipse, which is different from the solar eclipse. And you can see it looks like there were some stars there on the side. Here, I'll leave you with this one, because this is a total lunar eclipse and there is a lot of starlight around it. And that's actually the planet Uranus. And it's easier to take this picture and get a lot of starlight. When you're taking a total solar eclipse, you get a little less starlight, but you do see the planets, like you heard in that video where we were kind of going off about it and having a great time. And so those of you, and then here's a full moon, but it was covered with clouds, and Mars happened to be emerging from the side. That's Mars, that's the moon. So preparing to shoot a total solar eclipse, take some pictures of the full moon, see how sharp you can detail you can get, and keep those settings. There's f6.3, 1/800, 600, ISO 100. So these are the settings that I may go to do the total solar eclipse. And focusing, use the edge of the eclipse to see if you can autofocus. Otherwise, you're going to be, what you would want to do is use your filter, get a nice sharp shot of the sun, or if you're brave, try and get a nice sharp shot of the sun with your aperture turned all the way up. Leave your focus where it was, and then see if you get an in focus picture without the filter. Just setting your settings, and then shoot and see if you get a sharp image of the total solar eclipse. So at this point, I am going to stop because I am going to be doing, let's see, I think there's roughly a half hour for questions, if there are any, and I'll try to answer them best I can. So
Thanks,
I am
Adrian.
going to.
I've got one that came in, Adrian, just directly to me. So I just figured I'll pass that one on as a starter, if that's okay. I should put my face back on. Here I am. Just to clarify, when you were talking about like when to take pictures of the sun and when not to, if you're just taking pictures of the sun outside of the solar eclipse, can that actually damage the camera, or were you just worried about people's eyes, or will it just be a washed out photo?
All three. Depends on when you take the picture and how long.
Okay.
You damage your camera if you let the shutter sit open for a long exposure, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and it's a full-on sun high in the sky. That's a great way to damage your camera. If it's a full-on sun low in the sky, take a quick photo. Use your fast shutter settings and use your aperture to be as narrow as possible, and then you're in better, your camera doesn't die at that point. And I would say once the sun rises to a point where it's maybe, I don't know, 5 or 10 degrees above the horizon, when you can tell it's getting bright and it's hard for you to look, it's even harder for your camera to look. So that photo, it was kind of a lucky photo. The one that I took above that cloud bank is about the limit at which taking pictures of the sun is in any part a good idea. And that's even with your shutter is fast, and especially with a mirrorless camera, because it's getting exposure numbers, so your shutter is open and looking at the sun. So it's not impossible. It doesn't damage. My camera still works to this day, and I've taken pictures, both of them. It's just I've had to be careful and take these pictures when the sun is in a certain location, like rising or setting. And I've used the iPhone pictures and taken the iPhone camera. The sun is still at it's lower in the sky, but it's still blazingly bright. I've taken pictures. I don't recommend doing that very often. My camera survived, but it's you are taking a chance exposing, the longer you expose your sensor to it. It's just like your eyes. If you glance at the sun, it's gonna hurt, or at least it's supposed to, and you pull away and you start seeing all sorts of things. Keep doing it and your eyesight will be impacted. It's not something I recommend doing. You accidentally see the sun and you catch it, you just look away, you're fine. But I wouldn't make it a hobby.
All right. Another thing, earlier you mentioned 2 people to look to for references, and I put Alan Dyer in the chat with a link to his website, but I was so busy looking it up, I missed your second person.
Fred
So,
Esmanek.
all right,
And I
maybe
was gonna
you can
see
put
if
that in
I
the
could
chat.
put that in the chat.
Yeah,
Be able to. Okay. Fred Esmanek.
thank
That
you.
is the
All right, somebody
so
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll answer this question, although what white balance, ISO, exposure, optimization, and resolution should I use for an acceptable standard picture? White balance, auto. If you have a modern camera, anything from 2013 on forward, no need to set the white balance. ISO, started at base. Exposure time, like I said, like the full moon. Optimization and resolution, I always shoot with RAW. So you can do JPEG, large JPEG, and RAW helps. And you take another look. Those are the settings that I use to get a starting image. If you have a mirrorless camera or an old DSLR and you use live view, that's your cheat code. You set your settings until what you see in that live view is close to what you're seeing with your eyes. Now, mind you, you may have anywhere between 2.5 minutes to 4 minutes to do that. So those settings will start you, and you can use your live view to get it close. And then once you see something you like, or if it's close enough, take the photo. Mess with the aperture or f-stop and turn it up or down. Mess with your shutter speed and turn those up or down. And then once you get your shot, one of the tricks you do in post-processing, which I didn't talk a lot about, but basic post-processing, lower the highlights. You can do this on your smartphone picture too. Take the highlights, lower them, take the shadows, raise them up a bit. Those 2 sliders essentially help mimic what your eyes are able to do, and a camera sensor cannot. So go ahead with the other questions now. I'll just answer them.
There was one asking, and I don't remember what you were talking about at the time, but they said, so a viewing area near a large lake would be an advantage weather-wise. Would the Finger Lakes or Lake Champlain be good? Or what do you think about
the giant seas that the Great Lakes are the size that help create weather. So it may be cloudy in the area, but those giant seas may cause clearings that you wouldn't see over land. It's kind of like weather being created over the ocean. The seas are large enough to affect weather patterns, things like clouds not moving directly across the lake. The other side of that is they may create cloudiness, and it's anywhere that's in vicinity of the lake's not going to see it. So you have to look at what's being predicted. I'll type in the name of a really good program that I use, Astrospheric. Shows cloud cover. It's something that astronomers, those of us that do amateur astronomy, we use it to see if it's going to be clear enough to do any kind of imaging or any kind of observing. And you can use a program like that to determine if it's going to be clear enough to see the eclipse. Now, for example, last night it was fairly cloudy, but the full moon was still visible. So you can kind of gauge eclipse viewing if the full moon shines through, the eclipse will shine through. Or the sun itself, the disk of the sun is pretty bright. If there's clouds, but the sun shines through and gets bright, then a full eclipse would be visible. Although you may need binoculars, it may be partially blocked. But it may still be visible. If it's so thick that neither the sun or moon are visible, a total solar eclipse is nothing but an opportunity to watch it go dark and not know what's causing it.
We got another question about somebody was planning to go to Toledo and they're wondering if they need to go to Cleveland instead. They were trying to avoid the larger city.
Try to avoid the larger city. Cleveland is in the path. They've got big things planned, but if you are not into being around a lot of people and in the big city, stay within the path of totality and find something smaller. Light pollution does not matter. I see that avoiding light pollution is a good thing. That's only if you're going to do night photography like I do. Let me share. I will share. I'll share my desktop again. And well, I'm sharing sound even though I don't need to. Go to one of the pictures I took recently from Canada. If I can find, I guess I'll just scroll this way. Light pollution has no bearing. Here's the moon at quarter. Light pollution has no bearing on sun or moon events. Setting sun still dominates the sky. And here's a full moon. But if you want a picture like this, notice how there's very little light pollution on the horizon, and look how detailed it is versus and look, there's no light pollution. The Milky Way begins to appear, and you see there's still nautical twilight, and this sun hasn't set yet. And it turns into that at night. It's a very beautiful thing. Only night photography is affected. I go back up here to one of these places. So you just saw that Milky Way. Here's the same thing, but in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with the big light dome right here. This is when light pollution affects your imaging, because it washes out faint objects in the universe. But the sun and the moon are both close. The sun itself is close enough. Light pollution does not matter when you're taking a photo, of the eclipse itself. It only matters when, for instance, remember that picture I showed you? Here's light pollution from Port Huron in Michigan, and I still got a lot of stars, but pay attention to this. I brightened Sagittarius on purpose because it was a picture for my mom. So I brightened Sagittarius so she could see that that's where Sagittarius is. But other than that, you see this nebula. We go back to those pictures I took in the dark area. Some plane went through, but all the stars, and all of this is with a camera. I used the same camera for both of these shots. And out here in a desert area, more light is coming, able to make it down. And so the camera I used caught this extra light that it couldn't catch. All of this glowing is coming from other light that is emitted from space, from wherever these regions are, and I'm able to catch that using the exact same camera. This is all I was able to capture. This is a little wider view. So you look at that picture, or we even zoom in and we look at this picture and compare it to these. and you see the huge difference in what you're able to capture when you're doing night sky photography. Even the sky color is a little different. And this, out of everything, this is a different part of the Milky Way, and you can see all of this detail. So light pollution, that was a very long answer to tell you, even if the sun just set, it's dominating the sky in that area. And, here's what that looks like in a panorama. But up here, when I went to that same area at night, all of this light pollution happened. Clouds, there's Orion. This is that same area that I had taken those pictures of the sunset, moonrise. And this was a different night when there was no moon out, and I got all the starlight. That's actually a part of the Milky Way too. But you see how it washed out. So that was a quick primer on light pollution and what it can do to an image, but you don't have to worry about that when it comes to an eclipse.
Adrian?
Yes.
Excuse me. The person who added an explanation, she was asking about seeing stars with
Okay.
in totality. So that was why she was asking about light pollution.
Seeing stars and light pollution. Even when there's light pollution, you see some bright stars and planets, and you'll see the same ones. If Orion is out, you'll see the bright stars of Orion. But there are places, if there's no light pollution, those places would show more stars. You might be able to get a faint wisp of the Milky Way during totality. I don't know that I'm going to be in one of those places because I'm focused more on totality. But any place where the full moon is bright and you can still see a lot of stars, those are places like the places I just showed where, it's just an explosion of stars. The image behind you is such a place where you might see more stars during totality. I would advise focusing on totality itself. Now, if you've seen totality a few times, go with, a place with less light pollution and see what else you can find.
Someone else asked about if they need to be near the center of totality or the edge, and like what the difference in time is for what you'll see. So I did post a link to a map. I had to click through the pictures because I guess they're trying to sell it, but it shows you, at least for Ohio, how many minutes of totality you'll have in different sections of it, and those exist for other areas as well. But I don't know if that may be a Cleveland Toledo difference too.
Yeah, and Meffy posted Norwalk, Ohio might be a good place because it's close to the center. So the closer to the center of totality, the longer you get to see totality and experience it. If you're near the edge, you may get a few seconds. If you're right on the edge, you may get a few seconds. Boom, the moon and the sun cover, and the corona comes out. It's dark, and then 5 seconds later, the moon moves off of the sun. But if you're on the center line, I'm hearing times of 4 minutes. The longest time is actually in Mexico, like 4 minutes, and I want to say 4.5 minutes if you view totality as it strikes the Earth, as it gets into Mexico, the shadow gets to Mexico, seems to be, or New Mexico maybe. It's the longest time down there, and it's getting gradually shorter. But the 3 minutes of totality that you'll see in Cleveland is still longer than the 2.5 minutes that we saw. And 2.5 minutes was actually, time seemed to stand still for a while we were sitting there and watching it. So there you go. The further away from the center line, the less totality you see. And in Detroit, you don't see it at all, but you get close.
Methy asked, does it stay bright towards the horizon during the eclipse?
It turns into that belt of Venus look. If you look at a nice clear sunset and look, anywhere but where the sun is setting, you start to see this colorful belt going around the horizon. That's what it looks like during an eclipse. You see kind of a salmon pink, you might see a blue, you might see some other, you might see another color. They call that the belt. It's been called the belt of Venus. Sometimes Venus is actually near that area of the horizon, but it does start to get dark. It looks like dusk, and the best way I can describe it, it's nautical twilight and just about to go into astronomical twilight. Once astronomical twilight, it's not completely dark, but you see more stars. Totality doesn't quite get that far, but gets close. And I keep mentioning Mephi. I took a picture of those colors the other day. You would be taking a picture of them around the entire circle, so there wouldn't be a piece where the sun is setting that you can't really see anything because the sun's, even if it's below horizon, it's just gonna, the entire horizon around you looks as though it's opposite the sun, and in the way it kind of is because the sun's up there. It's just the effect of that much light from the sun being blocked. Mia asked a question: can you see the moon's shadow on the earth if you're up on a mountain, or do you have to be in an aircraft to see that? The answer to both questions is yes. A lot of folks fly drones and they show the shadow of the moon coming, and it covers the area, and then you can see light as the shadow of the moon is moving and receding along with the moon beginning to move off of the sun. Some folks have captured that. I think Alan Dyer may have been one that's done that. A few drone flyers have gotten that, and it's pretty spectacular to watch. I focused on the eclipse itself, but yes, it is. Yes and yes are the answer to your questions. And then if you're in space, I think the lunar orbiter caught a picture. Look for a picture of the 2017 eclipse as seen from the lunar orbiter. There's a blot right over where Tennessee is. I was thinking they took that picture right around the time I was able to view the eclipse, so I thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, you can see the dark shadow on the circular shadow on the earth.
Adrian, a while ago, there was a question about the settings you were recommending for the full moon, F11, and then you said something else. And
Yeah,
someone
1
asked
over
if
ISO.
I'm
And
sorry?
that's for those who, ISO is a setting. It's kind of a gain setting on your camera. For those that have taken photography courses, it's a level of gain that you add, because we're for film photography, film would be rated at those numbers. So the camera at ISO 100, the idea was this is what we see. So if it's dark in a room, the image is going to be dark as well. But if you got some film that was rated at a higher ISO, considered quote unquote faster, more light, it would detect more light, and that was considered faster. So for shooting at the full moon, shooting at an eclipse, and if you're shooting at the sun, you don't want your camera to pull in so much light so fast, because it does not have to. there's plenty of light that it'll see. Now, if you're trying to do a scene with it, you have to play around and, you know, you can change that setting along with some of the others to try and, you know, get a sort of a combination, or you just take 2 photos, one to expose for the ground and one to expose for the eclipse.
Well, thank you, Adrian. I know you have another commitment. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for joining us and giving us all this detail.
You're
We're
welcome.
gonna
I
learn
know
more about photography.
yeah, and so there may have been some of you out there. I see there's some left who really into the photography side, and others just want to see the eclipse. So we started off with the most important setting of all, and that's make sure you've got your eclipse glasses and your eyes and just enjoy it. And if you're going to live long enough for the next solar eclipse, you can begin to worry about pictures. You can try taking the picture with your phone if you want. Follow the links. Those 2 gentlemen explain some more detail as they've chased a few eclipses themselves and have, you know, more ideas for you if you want to do that. But I recommend enjoy the eclipse. And if you can't see it in the area and you can't travel, watch it on YouTube. There'll be a few live streams where you can enjoy seeing the eclipse as someone else puts it on camera and follows it and uses their
We will be
settings, and then
watching
you go
on
from there.
NASA.
You'll watch it on NASA, that
On
site that I
NASA,
showed
as
earlier.
well as hopefully seeing it live.
Yep, and thank all of you who
Yes, thank
hung
you.
around. And, you know, as we get closer to the eclipse, don't be afraid to look for any information you can. Even I'm going to be looking for some more info and watching weather forecasts and things like that, because I may up and drive to Arkansas if I have to. You know, a couple days before, I'm just going to go south. If everything looks bad to the north, I'm just going to go south. So that is, you know, that have a plan, have a backup plan, and have a flight plan if you can afford to do so. And thank you all to those who came out. So Jennifer, Megan, I am going to go, and please contact me to do more of these. I can
Yes.
talk more about those night sky photos again once the allure of the eclipse dies down. We can talk about summer and that place that's behind you and how beautiful it is out there, and the fact that I'm selling prints. And I'll do a shameless plug for my fledgling website that's seen a little bit of activity lately. I somehow got this link. This is a place where you can buy some of my photos. I've got some. I don't have Eclipse. I do have Eclipse photo, I think, but it's a partial one.
Mhm.
I've got aurora photography, and I got a lot of night sky photography and even some birds. So if you want, go out there and check it out and see what we've got. I'm hoping to add after April 8th, 2024. I'm hoping to add some good eclipse photography to that. So those will be available. But check it out if you want. And I will hopefully see all of you again at another talk.
All right. Thank you again. And I
Thanks.
did drop the link to our YouTube sub channel. Again, it will be a couple of weeks before this recording is up there.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Megan. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you
who
guys.
came.
Okay, bye
All
everyone.
right.
Bye.
Have a good night.